So how do you study for a sermon series that you know could be pretty complicated? And that's for my new overhead rig, which I just kind of had to show off a little bit. But I'll talk about all the cool stuff you just saw then in a later video. Let's get to it. I'm Chad Brooks. I'm a pastor here in North Louisiana, and I love to preach. I love studying. I love research. But I also love the craft of putting things together. If I'm going to be 100% honest, that's probably half of the fun in it for me. And I'm about to wrap up a teaching series on the Song of Songs. I'll put a link to that whole playlist right here if you want to listen to those messages. But I wanted to sit down and just talk about what resources I chose to use inside of this series, because it wasn't necessarily more than normal, but it began growing more and more. And so I've got like tons of stuff. I've got this pile next to me on a chair of just like resources and resources and resources. I probably actually overbought a little bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put every single thing I talk about in an Amazon list. I'm going to drop a link to that in the show notes if you want to find any of these sorts of things. That will be the easiest way for you to do it. But the book of Song of Songs is it's kind of a complicated book. There's a huge history of interpretation of it, and there's a lot of different interpretive strategies. And I knew that this was going to be a really important series for our church for many different reasons. So I wanted to make sure that I did it really clearly, and I did it in a different way. Now, I had put a video together already of just like a quick way that I like to think of sermon series. You can watch that if you want to know more about how I kind of divide up series in like big series and little series. I call them mini series and major series. And this was a major series. That was how it fit my description. So I'm going to go through the commentaries. And I'm going to go through the other stuff that I read that was not commentary. I'm going to talk about why I read it. Now, I'm not going to try to rank all of these commentaries because there's a lot of them. Some of them I've used like crazy, and some of it I've not. I think it's important to understand why a commentary was written and what you're using a specific commentary for. So I'll kind of talk in and out of that. So for me, one of the commentaries I used tons on this was the Ancient Christian Commentary on that. There's going to be glare. I like this a lot because it's early church fathers writings, it's patristic writing, and the book of Song of Songs was one of the favorites of the early church. And when I was reading some of my couple initial commentaries to get like a wide range on things, they kept going back to quoting a handful of the church fathers. And luckily I have the whole set of these, and so I pulled this off and I knew this was going to be a huge resource for me. And so I've spent a lot of time inside the Ancient Christian Commentary and Scripture section of Song of Songs. Now next, this is a Do-Good's, this is to Tyndale. I'm going to be honest with you. I looked through this like one time and it wasn't saying anything that others weren't saying. I always trust this commentary set, and these are super cheap. And so I kind of tend to buy one every time I'm preaching through one book for the first time. It's the way I'm trying to buy up the whole set of these. It was all right. It was all right. But like I said, nothing wasn't anywhere else. Now, here's Glidhell's on the Song of Songs. I liked this because it did a really good job of talking about the song, but also he's not from America. He's an African. And he's taught all over Africa, and also understands just a different perspective than the way that many of us Americans are going to get into this because of experience, and also like not just in biblical studies. This author was going to give a very, very different view than a lot of what other people would. It was standard, but the way he gets to it was different. So it was interesting. Word biblical commentary. This is like a classic. This is one of the sets everybody has. I bought this up as I was prepping for this series. And this is what I found out. Some of these commentaries, there's the history of the interpretation of the songs is really, really big. And what I found was some commentaries just took an interpretive path
that I was not anywhere kind of close to going, and this was one of them. But it's just dug into the historical side because of what Song of Songs is like. Some people just don't want to talk about all the gnarly stuff. They just kind of want to stay away from that. And this seemed to be it. But for the language side of the work, I could not beat the language side of this, which is really what I find helpful about the Word Biblical Commentary series. So this was a good one. The New International, the NIV Application Commentary, solid. Kind of falls into the bracket of, some people aren't saying, there's only so many things you can say. I bought a lot of commentaries for this series because I really want to make sure I covered the water. So I knew I was going to get some. They're okay, yeah, it's all right, it's good, solid. Stuff like this. That's what this falls into. Now, Paul Griffiths from the Brazos commentary set, this was a good one. I use this one a lot. I've actually, no, that's an old one. I taught a Bible study on the Song of Songs to a bunch of senior citizens one time. Their request, that was a little awkward. I thought this was one of the older ones from there, but no, this is not. The Brazos set, I think like this commentary series is really designed, and so this followed the interpretive pathway that I chose to take with the book really, really well. So I found myself spending a lot of time in this. Odonnell's The Song of Solomon, An Invitation to Intimacy. This is from a different, not just song, but from just kind of thought, very different theological path than I normally am. But there's a path that deeply respects Scripture and deeply respects what Scripture is and that sort of a thing. And so it was very handy. I found it a little bit too tongue-in-cheek, like it was trying to get around. Okay, this is Song of Songs. It was trying to get around the sex stuff, just way too often, but it was like a really, really good, there's really good work in here. And so I took the scholasticism and just didn't really do that much with the actual commentary, but it was song. Possibly my second favorite commentary that I used inside of this series is Tremper Longman's from the Nicot. The Nicot's a great set. The way the Nicot does things and thinks about things and the scholars they put inside of there were great. I liked Tremper Longman's, not just his scholasticism, which was really, really good, but he didn't nosedive into the language stuff too much, but his thoughtfulness and his theological vision and his theological commentary for it was really good. This would be, I would say, get this one for certain if you're going to do anything in the Song of Songs. It's just great. The Hermaneau, this is from Murphy. I was on a commentary buying spree. I found a used copy of this for not too much. Sometimes Hermaneau can be really expensive, and Hermaneau is super thorough. I got this for the language resources. It took a different kind of interpretive path than I was taking, so some stuff wasn't that helpful, but the language stuff is just rock solid inside of here. And because of the way the song uses language, I wanted to make sure I could understand that. Also, this did a really good job talking about poetry and how to read Hebrew poetry. And unlike with the Word, which is another heavy academic commentary, it dealt with the fact that there's a lot of Egyptian and Babylonian and Akkadian love poetry as well that's very similar. It got really, really wooden in the Word Biblical, and it did not in this. And so this was a good one. The Anchor Bible Song of Songs. I picked this up used. It came in the day before the third out of the fourth sermon was to be preached, so I didn't get a chance to actually use it that much. Floating through it, this was written in the mid 70s, I think. And it kind of takes one of those paths that a lot of people struggle to take with the song is how do we not super, it sounds so backwards. How do we not super Jesus this thing up? But that's also the Anchor Bible. The Anchor Bible is another academic, scholastic commentary. I mean, you can see, the Song of Songs in my Bible is 4 pages, and look at this thing. I mean, it's massive. So it's good. It's a little dated in the fact that, they're not wanting to get, deeply, deeply theological. So instead, it takes this Hebrew interpretive path, which is all right, which is cool. I get it. But that's not what I was trying to do. And so that's all that. I've got one left. And this is everybody, when I started talking about this on Twitter, and everybody I've talked to is this is the commentary on Song of Songs, Chad. And I would agree. It completely is the commentary. But Robert Jensen's volume from Interpretation. I got this. I have this on this version. I've also got the Kindle version of it. And I did another video on like how I prepared this series. And I love the Kindle version because I also have the ESV scripture journals. And I have the digital version. And I was just like sitting many times at many places, reading through my passages, taking notes on those, and then like copying, pasting stuff from Robert Jensen. But Robert Jensen's a biblical theologian. That's really the school of thought I ascribe to a lot of times. So like Jensen's volume was huge. If I were you, and if you were going to get a very short list of commentaries on Song of Songs, and you needed to do something with it, this is what I would get. I would get the Jensen volume. I would get Trimper Longman's Song of Songs from the Nikot, and I would get Griffiths in the Brazos. And you can find all of the early church stuff, especially from Origen. And I think also Bernard of Clairvaux, he's not a church father. You can find that for free online. So I would just go print that off somewhere and have copies of that. And then I would grab one of the more academic sets. And so grab the Word Biblical or the Hermaneau, something like that. This was fantastic. This was great. I would stay away from like pastors writing books about sex using Song of Songs. That's kind of what I throw this into. And that's the line I chose to not take when I was preaching through this series. And so these are the three I would get. And I also got a couple of other books to help understand just some of how the song is trying to build a completely different biblical vision of sexuality. I knew I also wanted to kind of dig into modern culture and how many of the ways that modern culture is running antithetical to the larger biblical vision of sexuality, of which I chose to talk about singularity versus promiscuity. And singularity is not just in our physical sexual relationships, but singularity is a larger echoing theme across all of Scripture. Why we see sexual imagery used to talk about idolatry, that sort of a thing. And I knew that I was going to have to do some compare and contrasting. So I pulled a couple books off my shelf, and I did not read these cover to cover. I was using these as research text. But the first is this, The Ascent of Humanity by Charles Einstein. This is just a really big understanding of the human idea of the self, which is about individualization, which is a line I chose to take on this. The next was a book I've been flipping through. I bought last year. Like I was using this as research text. One thing else is The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self from Carl Trueman. Now this is from Crossway. This is a different theological family than I fall into, but I'll tell you, this was a fantastic book. I'm going to read the whole thing this summer. And the last is this. I've used this more than anything else, and I've actually started, if you can kind of look and tell and see that, yeah, focus is not going to grab that. I've actually started going through and reading this cover to cover, but it's called Strange Rites, New Religions for a Godless World, as understanding just kind of the cultural moment that we are in right now. So those are the resources that I used to prep out for this Song of Songs series. I would love for you to just tell me in the comments what questions you might have. If it's a question about commentaries, if it's a question about like sermon resources, or if it's a question about the Song of Songs, remember, I'm going to link into that sermon series right here so you can get that playlist. There's 4 messages in that. When it's done. And also I've got a video on my theory of commentaries and what I do with commentaries. But then also I'm working on a video, I'm not sure when it's going to be out, where I was going through how I was prepping this series out to just kind of talk about how I prep out big sermon series ideas. So I'm Chad Brooks. If you like this video, let me know. Hit subscribe, hit like. Tell me in the comments like what more content like this would you like to see? Because I love YouTube and I love talking about learning. So I will check you later.